You have the right mindset, it attracts the right network, and that creates excellent. This is interesting because it does apply to your own. You have the right mindset, it attracts the right network, and that creates your opportunities. The right mindset attracts the right network, creates right opportunities.
Welcome to RevOps Champions, a podcast designed for revenue professionals looking to advance sales and marketing initiatives through the role of RevOps within their organizations. In each episode, we feature leaders who are leveraging technology to drive operational efficiency, revenue, and improve the customer experience. Listen in and learn how to become a better RevOps leader within your own organization. Let's get started.
Justin Breen, it's awesome to have you here with me today on RevOps Champions. Thanks so much for connecting recently and for the great first conversation that we had a few days ago. I'm fascinated by the work that you're doing. I'm halfway through your latest book, Epic Life,
Thank you.
and I had to stop reading it about 2 hours ago because I figured if I did it too close to the call, then I'd be too deep in the zone not to really be able to do a proper interview, because there's some really powerful stuff that you're sharing in the book. Would you mind maybe just by giving us your quick introduction to, where you came from and where you are today?
Well, one, thanks for reading the book. I appreciate that. At the end of that, being an entrepreneur and would never let entrepreneur life destroy my family life. So started first company 5 years ago with zero business background. Been journalist for 20 years, and now have two global companies that partner with top visionaries on the planet. They're those who will action, make investments that become that first. Very simple.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, when you and I spoke a few days ago, I learned, of course, very quickly after meeting you a week before on a strategic coach call where there were, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 people calling in for the weekly power up. And I, of course, noticed immediately, why your Colby is what it is. And of course, that's, which is, it's fascinating and ironic, because that's one of the things that you're very passionate about is knowing who you are and then knowing who the kinds of people are that you want to connect with as you build your global business, as you call it, which, I'm still new to strategic coach. And I didn't actually share with you my background, but one of the things I was listening to in your book this morning talked about what I called your theme for the year.
Yeah.
And I started doing this 3 years ago, and of course was really happy to hear that this is something that you do and that you've learned to do and obviously really swear by. And it's, of course, when you listen to the book, you realize how powerful that's been for you.
Yeah.
One of the things I haven't shared with you yet, which was now prompted by listening to that chapter in the book, was I've been doing this for a few years now. And my theme for last year was gratitude, which I know has become a practice that you've been doing for, I don't know how long now, but it's, again, one of the things you do every day. And my theme for this year, in fact, was know thyself. And again, no surprise to you, even though this is probably a little out there for most of the people listening, I believe that the reason I ended up starting Strategic Coach a few months ago was because of my theme for the year, which is to know thyself. Because, of course, as you know, one of the first things you dig into in Strategic Coach is knowing your unique ability, which, of course, is very, very closely aligned to knowing thyself. I was fascinated about the two things that drive you every day. Is essentially making sure that you're taking the best possible care and spending as much possible time with your family. And the other is your let's say your business goal, which is to connect entrepreneurs globally. And then kind of see what amazing things come from those connections. Would you tell me a little more about, some examples again, they might be in the book and I might not have heard them yet. I've heard a couple where, you talked about, someone that's now a powerful part of your network who is a very unusual entrepreneur who, again, according to his Colby score, wouldn't really be an entrepreneur because he's low on the quick start. I think he's a 5 on the quick start, but become a Jason. Yeah. But anyway, just maybe a few examples of, and again, with the lens of most of the people listening to this show are really passionate about making businesses run better, right? The theme and the philosophy that we're all about, that we help our clients build into their businesses, is called revenue operations, which again doesn't sound like a philosophy, but it is. It's essentially the alignment of your people, processes, data, and technology systems, which again is not new, but it's a new way for businesses to go to market with their revenue teams being one, their revenue team being one team versus 3 silo teams, with all their data and technology systems completely aligned and integrated, where they're literally all paddling in the same direction together versus living in their daily silos and then wondering why they're not able to connect with their customers in the way that their customers deserve to and want to be connected with. So do you have any thoughts on how your sort of entrepreneurial sort of passion and journey every day to connect people, how that might align with some of the things that we're talking about? How do you really run a business that can scale through the lens of aligning either people or process or data or systems or all 4?
Okay, so one, that was a lot of it, but that was a very long series of questions there. And so most of my days doing and simplifying into an answer. So I appreciate the way you asked that, and then my brain simplifies it. Oh, there you go. So all my companies are giant incubators of businesses, and we're constantly producing each other for mutual gain. And the byproduct is constantly getting into the companies around the world that want to hire a PR firm to get us through the world, or folks who want to create a new company, which is LinkedIn without the BS, invite only, high price connectivity platform. And naming your years, 2021, no limits, no limits, no limit. When there are no limits, there are no limit. There's no limits to the amount of visionaries who live in abundance, and you look at things as investments at cost that want to share the story of the world, and there's no limits to those people that want to be an invite-only connectivity platform to connect with other people that actually want to do something. And those are the people like you are the ones that create things that actually help everyone else. So people like you create the consciousness, the companies that help all the companies about it. My company just aligns with the 0.1% of people that actually create things that help everyone else.
Right. Interesting.
Well, align certain sectors, and my company aligns people that align things to everyone else. So we partner with visionaries who live in abundance, and we look at things as investments in the cost. So that's maybe 0.1% of the population, 8 million out of 8 billion. Those 8 million are the ones that actually create the things that help everyone else.
Right. So would you consider yourself a data guy?
No, God, no. That's funny. I'm only mentioning this because I think it's funny. I got a 35 on my ACT in math portion, and I do not like math. I don't, and data and that kind of stuff. It really annoys me. Like for me, everything is on gut and going for it and not looking at data at all. You just do it and see what happens. So I understand analytics. I understand why that exists. It's just to me, like, it's not humanistic. It's like more robotic. And I'm more of like, the only way to learn anything is just taking action and going for it.
Right. Yeah. No, the reason I asked it because you talked about, I noticed, so, the few times that we've spoken in the book, you use statistics like, there are X percentage of visionaries, et cetera. So I was just that was the only reason for my question.
Okay.
But I think what I'm hearing is that you obviously do a lot of research because that's your background as a journalist, right? You then figure out like what are the 2 or 3 main data points that are relevant to the work that you do. and then you kind of just, then you forget about the data, move forward and just get it done.
100%. So one, that's very high level thinking. Two, that's 100% accurate. Like basically what happens is as a journalist, and I'm a very high finder holder, you're sick, very high, really high. As a journalist, it's fun to like find little facts and quirky things because like people like that stuff and it substantiates points and all that stuff. In this world, it's been used to find the patterns and things about people that actually do something who are actually visionaries. And then once you know the answer, here's your answer. And then top three strength finders, Clifton Galt strength finders are actively maximize achieve. So immediately you're blah, 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 and then go, keep going, never stop.
Right. So another thing that I picked up just, the one time that we've spoken before, and of course I'm learning a lot from your book, Epic Life, where of course you're digging into these things that you're most passionate about. And the chapter, of course, I'm not sure if this is the chapter that you think is, again, I think it probably depends on the reader, but one of the chapters I listened to this morning was finding your BrEPs.
Yeah.
And for those of us who don't know a strategic coach or don't know Dan Sullivan or haven't read any of his books, Dan Sullivan, again, is, as I don't know how many best-selling books, most recent ones being, Who Not How, The Gap in the Gain. But he credits, his success. And of course, you're continuing that same story of someone who's a quintessential visionary leader, but who recognized the fact that they would not be successful without their BREPs, or in the EOS language, which is where, operating system that we use and a lot of the people that we work with, a lot of our clients and a lot of the listeners use EOS as their entrepreneurial operating system. And I know that there's a lot of overlap between EOS and strategic coach.
Yes.
At many levels. And the visionary integrator role in EOS is referred to as rocket fuel.
Yes.
As you know. So this is maybe more familiar territory to some of our listeners. And can you tell me a little bit more, share a little more insight into, so I've already learned a lot from you the last week from a coaching perspective, but just share a little more about what makes the amazing connection and success between a visionary and an integrator.
Well, it's a great question for many reasons. And I'll dovetail that into why it's a really interesting case in my reason, because it's like a unicorn type situation. So I would say most visionaries are like true visionaries, very high quick start, very low follow through in the world. So their idea, and if they don't have a bunch of people following through for them, nothing would ever get done. So think AD diagnosed, undiagnosed. It is not a disorder. It's kind of genius. It's just mislabeled by you. Okay, so that's most vision. I would describe it as an integrating visionary, which is very rare because I have high quick start and high follow and high spec finder. So say it, do it. Say it, do it. Say it, do it. Hit the gas, pump the brakes. Hit the gas, pump the brakes. Okay. So that's great for my global PR firm where there's freelancers and all sorts of fun stuff. But like this stuff is so easy, fun, and lucrative for me that it's fun. I love doing it. Creating a second company, which is a SaaS platform, a LinkedIn type platform for 0.1%, I would electrocute myself if I did that. So Babs, Dan Sullivan's wife and co-founder, strategic coach Babs Smith, I needed someone to be an integrator for new company. So my code is 8671, which is that's the unicorn square. Most folks I talk to are similar to your 6293 or their 3393 or something like that. Partner for second company is Mark Fujiwara. He and I are both in strategic coach 10X. He is a 1596. So he is a visionary integrator while I am integrating visionary. He is full back, very rare. He is full backstage, but even a bigger visionary than I am. And so that's why the rocket fuel aspect of this works. It's like, and then I'm an activator, maximizer. He's a competition maximizer. So like I get it started activating and then like handing off the baton because he will take that activation and competition maximize.
Right. So then taking that again, that rocket fuel relationship between visionary and integrator because most of our listeners are companies somewhere between 50 and 1,000 people, many of them still being run by the founder and visionary. Of course, to your point, a smaller percentage being run by someone who is a unicorn, who is both, is either a visionary integrator or an integrating
Very
visionary.
rare. It's 5%. It's less 5% or less. That's in rocket fuel.
Right. Exactly. But then obviously we have a lot of super smart people who work for entrepreneurial companies
Yeah.
in both our spaces, and they're probably a little more interested in what happens, from the integrator down. And so do you have any insights into, so once you have an integrator in place, assuming that there's a visionary and an integrator, although the other interesting statistic that I just learned in the last 6 months from our implementer is that 50% of EOS companies do not have a visionary, but 100% of EOS companies have an integrator.
That's amazing.
Right. It is amazing, but there's a very simple explanation, and that is companies that are further along. In other words, they've been around for a while. They've essentially built their engine of value. They don't necessarily need a visionary anymore. They can run with an integrator and maybe have someone on the leadership team who's responsible for innovation, R&D, and whatever.
Yeah.
But the visionaries essentially done their job. They've taken the business maybe from 0 to $1 million or whatever that number was. And then that's when an integrator steps in and takes over and does the magic that they do. Do you have any more insights into, how integrators then build the rest of the team with the main functions that every business has? Marketing, sales, whether those are together or separate, operations, finance, IT, HR, whatever. Do you have any insights into integrators that are able to build teams, and what makes those integrators more successful than others?
So one, it's a good question. Two, it's definitely a better question for he's the backstage understanding portion of that. What I will say is that with all the PR partners my firm has, they all have an incredible integrator that I have seen. And then from a cold lead perspective, if this is helpful, what I have seen is almost without exception, the visionary has at least a 7 quick start. Most are 8, 9, or 10 quick starts. You're a 9. And then integrators, of course, there are exceptions to this, but like a good integrator that I've seen, like 8, 7, or 2. So high fact finder, high follow through, middle to lower quick start, and then implementer aspect isn't necessarily as important unless it's something that you have to use your hands over. Yeah.
Great. There was a question that I had that was not forgotten because I'm so was cold.
Right.
You were saying something about the integrators that I've lost my train of thought. So again, so I'll try and keep the conversation then at the, I guess, visionary level, and figure out how we can still provide value to anyone who's listening, other than the fact that, of course, oh, yes, I just figured out one. So we've talked, well, you mentioned a couple of times your PR firm, and I've never asked you any more about what that even is. Could you please share with us exactly some details about your PR firm? How many people whether it's full-time, part-time, however that structure is. Tell me more about your PR firm.
So, well, I'm glad you never brought it up. The most insulting question that anyone could ask me is, what do you do? I just don't. I never ask anyone that. It's just a transactional type the plain question that's going on.
Yeah, it's very last century, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, what do you do? I don't know. Uh, Connect people, but the formula for creating a successful global company is very simple. Is you see a problem, create solution, problem solve, successful global company. So see a problem, create solution, problem solve, successful global company. So first company started it a little over 5 years ago with zero business background, zero. Journalist, 20 years, created entire business model based on how PR firms employed in 20 years. So saw a problem, created solution, problems, and successful global company. And again, because Colby and not a business owner, don't really care about employee count, revenue, office space. Like you don't get into journalism for that. Have several plans, you know, people that help with website and calendar and scheduling. But I mean, a lot, not most of it, but a lot of it, um, I'm able to very easily do myself, which I love doing personally. And there's no intent to scale that with massive amount of employees or it's too complicated. With new company, Mark Fujiwara has a master plan in place to scale it with numerous employees, and he found the team to build the website and all of those things, business strategy. He is in charge of all that, and I'm grateful for letting him do that because I would blow up a company if I did that.
Right. Right. Thanks. Justin, you and I can talk more about it. I'd like to, find out more about your PR company, but we'll touch base with you after. The other thing that's interested me, I lived in 5 countries on 2 continents before moving to the US
Hmm.
10 years ago. So, this is my 3rd continent that I've lived in, of course, the 6th country. And one of the things that, as I was sort of blending in, let's say, to, culture and the world that we live in the US, the comments I started getting a lot of in my first few years, and it slowed down a little bit now because my accent has also changed, I guess. But
Mhm.
was, Brendon, you have this really global perspective. I'm like, well, maybe it's because I, lived on 2 other continents and
Mhm.
5 countries, and I speak 4 languages, which
Hmm.
again is not, that is not anything special when you've lived my life, which hundreds of millions of people in Europe, for example, or Africa. That's very, very typical, very normal. But when you talk about this building a global business, right? And just from listening to the book, it seems like a very simple switch to go from a national business to a global business, that you make it seem so simple, and I get it. But when I realized, because the US is the biggest economy in the world, I realized, having lived here now for 10 years, that the reason that more US businesses don't go global is because they have such a massive market right on their doorstep, which is a lot easier to capture than having to go to other places in different time zones and different languages, different
Hmm.
currencies. But anyway, can you tell me a little more, which is why so few American companies become global? If you take, especially in the SMB space, it's crazy how few American companies actually go global. But you seem to have a view that makes it very simple to think about a global business,
Yep.
which might be easier when you're, working in the cloud or virtually. But
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about how I came to that realization that it's really no different building a global business to a national or even a local or regional business.
I love that question and that thinking. And again, going back to naming your year, 2020 was global growth. So well before COVID shut down, every day, global growth, global growth, global growth. And, joined Strategic Coast, and then also was in Entrepreneurs Organization, and then was about to join Abundance 360. Those are all global organizations. Certainly when COVID shut things down, even before that, having conversations around the world, and certainly COVID accelerated that. And what happened was there'd be partners in South Africa or England or Guatemala, New Zealand, Australia, and goes back to the same formula. See a problem, great solution, problem solved, successful global companies. So we are annoyed by press releases, get hundreds of a day from people you don't know. That's a problem. You create solution right on the website, problem solved, successful global companies. So it doesn't matter where the person's located or company's located. It doesn't matter what they do. And it doesn't matter how big the company is. It just solves the problem. I mean, and then with new company, people that are in it, members that are in it, they're from all over the world. And then I'm based in Chicago. My partner, Mark, he's in San Francisco. We've met 2 times in person. And then the person, David Mansilla, whose company built the platform, he's in Toronto, Canada. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I will agree with you 100% that being in the cloud, it makes it much easier. But I also will dovetail and double down on that, but there'll be more companies. I strongly feel there'll be more companies like that going forward because it's just much easier.
It absolutely feels like there's a wave of that happening, which
Right.
again is, one of the silver linings of the pandemic, which we're still hopefully the tail end of. But yeah, I just love the way you simplify otherwise kind of scary things for a lot of, very successful business people,
Mhm.
who I've met and have built, multi-$100 million businesses
Yeah.
without ever leaving, a state or at least the country. Again, so I mean, like I said, a lot of that is because they didn't really need to go anywhere else. But I do feel that a lot of it is just because it just seemed too complicated and too scary. But I think you're right. There's been a very real switch, and I think we'll see that happening over the next few years very really. I think we're already seeing it in, in the space that we're in. We're a HubSpot solutions partner, which HubSpot has 7,000 partners around the globe.
Mm.
And to me, it's very clear that there's going to be more and more collaboration between those partners in different countries. And there's very, very clearly, there's a move to many of those businesses that are HubSpot solutions partners who had, there's some that have been virtual businesses for 10 years or more, but then
Yeah.
there's others who, had all people coming into an office in one city. And that has obviously changed and it will continue to change. But I think that global collaboration, we can work with people in Colombia and Argentina
Right.
and the Philippines, Germany and Portugal, and it just goes on and on. There's no limit because we're all doing the same thing. It's not that different to your PR business.
It's the same formula. Well, and you just said HubSpot solution. See a problem, create solution. That solution, problem solved, successful global. And so it doesn't, it's just it's a simple way of looking at it. But, being a journalist for 20 years, I think that was actually a blessing because you don't get into that for revenue or, that's not why you become a journalist. Like, it's not, so it's like starting this blank slate where you like saw the simple way of doing things without navigating all the business owner stuff, without having to use that or look at that as like a stopgap or a stopping clock. You just go around it. So, and frankly, like a lot of that is the problem. So create solution from some successful global company. I mean, that's really the way I look at things. And then it'll continue to evolve, like you said, which is exciting to me to see it continue to evolve and go in different directions.
Yeah. It's interesting as you were talking, the two people was that, I think one of the things that you and I have in common is this propensity and almost a passion for connecting people.
Yes.
And even people that I have met, but been somehow mentoring me from wherever they are without even knowing it. And the two people that came to mind as you were chatting there were Malcolm Gladwell. You know, you just talked about your 20 years as a journalist. You always did more than your 10,000 hours, and
Well,
those 10,000 hours were not for nothing, right? They're probably a big part of who you are and where you are today. The other person is, again, completely different. I grew up in Southern Africa, so most of my sporting heroes were South Africans, and the one I'm talking about now is Gary Player, who, of
great
course,
golfer.
was a global.
He's in great shape still.
Yes, absolutely. And again, he would absolutely resonate with your epic line.
He's a full, yeah. I wonder what his Colby would be. I bet he's like a very high quick start. But that's what I mean. Like he's a full visionary, changing with the times, always looking for the latest innovation. And by the way, just background, I was working a long time, but then knowing the answer, like here's a guy like Jack LaLanne. Is it Jack LaLanne? I remember the guy who was 95 and he was like incredible shape, like doing 1,000 push-ups. That's what Gary Player reminds. I thought you were going to say somebody in rugby, but Gary Player.
Well, I mean, I could, but in this particular
No one
scenario, there was something that he said to a journalist. I forget if it was when he won the first Masters or the first British Open or whatever. It was one of the big, and a journalist came up to him and asked him a question, which probably wasn't the most, authentic question, I guess. But the journalist said something to the fact that, you're so lucky. Every time you ended up in the sand, in the bunkers in this tournament, you hit it out of the sand and it was incredible. Like everyone was within a few feet of the hole. And his response to the journalist was, yeah, it's really funny. The more I practice, the luckier I get.
Right.
So that became one of my favorite quotes and very closely related to the 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell researched.
Right.
About. If you practice, you'll get luckier. And I've heard, and you've probably heard the hundreds of entrepreneurs that you've interviewed say exactly the same thing, that there was a lot of luck.
Yeah. So talk to me is meaningless without an answer or action. So in first book, Epic chapter 29 is being lucky is part of success, but you have to put yourself in a position to be lucky. So, right. So,
And actually, and I'm just thinking about one of my past podcast guests that I mentioned to you when we spoke the other day was Mark LaChance.
Yeah.
Who I know you somehow connected with him at some point.
And quick start.
Yeah. Incredible guy. And I don't know if you know, but he actually launched I think it might be a best-selling book now too, called The Lucky Formula.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I think he would say the same thing, that a lot of what he's done and he's incredibly successful is because of luck, of being in the right place at the right time. But of course, being a humble entrepreneur, what he doesn't tell you is that the years and hours of blood, sweat, and tears that went into preparing for those lucky moments.
Yeah. Well, most people aren't cut out to be top performing entrepreneurs on the planet, and they would never work in, but more obvious and more importantly, they would never think about putting in the work that it takes to become. So that's why my first partner with people like Mark, because they're the ones that actually create things like all perfect hotels. That's the whole point. So,
right. So, Justin, I'm going to ask you another question here, totally out of the blue, because I know that being a journalist, you can roll with that kind of stuff.
I can handle it.
So there were thousands of people who were very happy last month to go back to Boston for the annual Inbound conference, which is HubSpot's annual conference, which of course didn't happen in person in 2020 and 2021. The last time that 27,000 of us were lucky to go was in 2019. So of course, when they announced earlier this year that this year would be in person, there were a lot of happy people who went, but they also opened it up, back to the earlier point we were talking about, to a virtual audience. And I think they had 40 or 50,000 people join virtually.
Worse.
Which why wouldn't you? Especially if you, for whatever reason, weren't able to make it to Boston in person. The question I wanted to ask you was, so HubSpot has an incredible leader, Yamini Rangan, who stepped in as CEO 2 years ago, and she's just an incredible leader. And she kicked off the theme for the conference around this disconnected world
Mm-hmm.
that we live in, right? And gave all these examples that I think everybody, whether they were there in person or dialing in virtually, resonated with how, and really what it came down to is that for the struggle for businesses right now is the disconnection with customers. In other words, their sales and marketing teams are struggling to connect more effectively with their customers because the way they connected with them in 2019 doesn't work anymore.
No.
And of course, at the same time, their connection with employees has become a lot more difficult because those same employees who used to come into an office, sometimes in most cases, 5 days a week, now are either entirely virtual or might do hybrid like we do. We have, people come in twice a week and then the other 3 days they can do whatever they like. And that's a fundamental change though in how you connect as a leader. So coming back to the sort of the visionary integrator type stuff and whatever other management goes from there, but then also on the customer side, do you have any insights from your research and learnings at businesses and how you would talk about a potential solution right now to fixing the disconnectedness problem that we face in the world?
It's an interesting question, maybe ironic or maybe not. I've never felt more connected in my life because my 10xing life, it's two things. One, experience in that day with my family, and 10xing network on a global level. So pretty much the answer to those questions every single day is yes. Well, it is. Great experience I did with my family and then network people on both levels. So I found that when you do that, everything else kind of takes care of itself. There's two things that will never fundamentally change. So microchips get smaller and smaller, technology gets faster and faster. That's great. I mean, if we're going to be having flying cars and all that stuff, that's great. But there's two things that will never change. One is the power of real connection, and never met in person, but this is a real human connection. Just a different way of doing it. Two is the power of storytelling. So hieroglyphics, Bible, date flipping, smoke signals. We're a global storytelling. And I was listening to Jason Pfeiffer. He's the editor of Entrepreneur Magazine. He has a book that just came out. And he said something. He was on James Altucher's podcast. That's one I love that show. And he's like, content builds relationships. I thought that would be a check in the third book. That was really smart. And I think creating these connections and connectivity is by creating the right type of content, whether that's, in company marketing, outbound company marketing, the right messaging between employees, regardless if they're in person or not, creating the right content and right relationships that will. And it's going to continue to evolve. I mean, the companies that have done well are the ones that adapted quickly, actively, and correctly in this situation.
Well, and of course, I think that would resonate very, very strongly with a lot of our audience who are typically, HubSpot fans, because the reason for the name of the conference being Inbound is very, very closely linked to why HubSpot, was founded by Brian Elling and the Dharmesh Shah back in 2006. And they essentially formalized the movement that, of course, was already happening that they saw, but no one else was really reacting to your problem. They saw the problem.
100%.
And they essentially really went deep into inbound marketing, which, of course, is creating content that connects with buyers at their time at their pace, in the way that they want to connect, when they want to connect, because clearly the writing was on the wall that, sales and marketing was going to change forever and continues to change. We've just seen that again. This whole disconnected theme that we're talking about is a large part of that is because sales and marketing teams, they haven't figured out yet. They will figure it out. But right now, many of them haven't figured out how to reconnect with customers at the same success rate as they were prior to March of 2020.
Yep, I would agree. Well, the other thing too is that journalists for 20 years and now constantly interviewed, and partners are constantly interviewed in media. I've seen how media change. Like shows like these are I mean, certainly for people like us who are replacing mainstream media in terms of relevance and reports. I mean, shows like these are transformational and transactional platforms for entrepreneurs. That's what they are. So, I mean, that's how it's changed, and will continue to go in that direction. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, and of course, whether it's cutting the cord from a television viewing perspective or whatever, all those things that you know have changed dramatically and have led to the success of Netflix, all the businesses are all examples of that change happening. I guess a lot of businesses didn't think that they would need to adapt the same way that Netflix had to adapt, for example.
Well, they were led by entrepreneurs. They were. That's where you get into trouble if there's not a vision. That's where you can get into trouble because they don't have the high quick start first. But yeah, but I mean that's what it is. Like you have to adapt. But again, the two constants are the power of real human relationships, whether it's in the virtual world or not, and then power of state. And this will never. That has been proven for the existence of our society.
Right. Thank you. That's really awesome. Justin, before I ask you my last question, do you have any questions for me?
So no one's ever asked you that. That's a good one. I like that. What represents a win to you every day? What is the most important thing for you every day? I'm just a simplifier. So what's the most important thing?
Okay, so before I answer that, if my last question to you was going to be, if you could leave our listeners with one sort of tip or takeaway, what would it be? Would your question to me be the same as the answer to that question?
It might be. Well, we'll see because I don't know your answer. I think your input off the chart. So again, my brain simplifies into patterns. That's all. That's what it does. So you have the right mindset, it affects the right network, and that creates excellent. This is interesting because it does apply to your own. You have the right mindset, it affects the right network, and that creates your opportunities. The right mindset affects the right network, creates right opportunities. And then I can make bigger investments in smaller rooms. People in those rooms are making bigger impacts. Bigger investment, smaller room, bigger impact. That allows me to spend biggest investment in the smallest room, which is my family life, make the most impact. So it's the same formula. You just use yourself as a litmus test of people you serve. That applies to any company, that applies to any team, any type of network, any type of framework. It's just I choose to partner with those guys who live in the box that look at themselves as investors, my costs. Is that the same answer?
I guess in a way, but I think one of the things that really stands out about you, Justin, is the fact that you know how to be real, and it's worked incredibly well because you know what is most important to you, and you make that your priority every single day, right? Which again, there might be other people who have figured it out, but I don't meet a lot of people who have figured it out to the same level than you.
Thank you.
So I think one of the things that you would encourage people to do is don't separate your family life from your work life. It should all be one life.
Collaborative.
Yeah. Which of course that's still something I'm trying to wrap my head around, even though of course as an entrepreneur, the two are inextricably intertwined.
Yeah.
The difference, I guess, for me is, and I know I've spoken to a lot of people the last two and a half years about this whole going to an office that is not at home deal. And for me, that's one of the ways that I separate, family life from work life is by coming into the office 2, 3, 4 days a week. That way I can compartmentalize, which is for me, as you know, as a I9 is a very difficult thing to do. But so my response to your question from a business perspective is, the purpose of Dynamico, our business, is all about change. So the name Dynamico, so we actually started the business when we were living in Spain, and we had a really smart friend who was an ex-Razorfish guy who offered to help us when we said we were looking for a name for our business, and kept asking us this question, which is, how are you going to help your customers or clients? So essentially the question you talked about earlier, like, what is the problem you're going to be solving? And this was back in 2009, right after we'd lost our real estate business in the '08 crisis.
Right.
And it was all around helping businesses adapt to changing technology, specifically the technology that helps you connect with your customers, right? So very simply put, sales and marketing technology. But really at the core of who we are is to help companies embrace what's next, right?
Mm.
And I know, I mentioned Peter Diamandis. He also wrote the foreword to your book. I was fortunate enough to meet him in February. He might not remember, although knowing him, he probably wouldn't.
He'll remember.
Yeah. He was speaking at a conference. He said, well, if anyone wants to, come and chat afterwards, I'll be outside for an hour. And of course, my wife, Kristen, and I went out, and there he was. We spoke to him, and asked him a favor. He responded within 10 minutes. It was incredible.
Yeah.
But, and he just launched his new podcast as well. And and I know you're part of, in fact, you're wearing the cap right now, but you got the Abundance cap. He's Abundance 360. Oh, there you go. And to me, there's one of the connections I have to Peter because of that is the fact that we have to embrace what's next, because obviously fearing what's next is not going to help. And that's my philosophy, and that's what I believe. That's obviously a big part of what we do here. So I'm going to give you another shot at your tip to our listeners. If you could leave the folks listening or watching, what is one thing that you would leave people with?
Well, I think I think of your company name, I think the word dynamic, and that it leads to the answer. Be dynamic, and take action. And I don't mean action in a week. I mean, like, right after listening to this, what can you do now? Like right now to move it forward.
Yeah, that's the follow through.
And the quick start.
Well, yeah. But again, for most people, because you're a unicorn, most people are going to resonate either with the quick start or the follow through.
Good
Awesome.
point.
Justin, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure, and I'm really grateful for having met you. And I know you and I are going to have many more conversations. I look forward to those. So thanks again. Also, happy birthday again to Jake. I know he had his 10th birthday earlier this week. It was a big one. It was 10/10. That was his golden birthday, correct?
It was. So
he turned 10 on 10/10. It's awesome.
10, 10, 10. And then heard the gratitude 2021, and I hope this helped you know thyself 2022.
It's turning out to be, just as you said in the book, it's turning out to be, if you set that theme, it can only make it happen. Kind of thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Justin, thanks again. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Perfect.
Thank you for checking out this episode of RevOps Champions. This show is powered by Dynamico, a HubSpot consulting firm, helping businesses level up the technology systems that power their ability to scale. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow RevOps Champions wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Or visit RevOpsChampions.com to get immediate access to all of the latest episodes.